Why are leading universities intentionally shrinking or reshaping their physical footprint? And what does that signal about the future of campus planning? Welcome to another Bowtie Tuesday. I am privileged to be joined by Andrew Sama from Huron to talk about the insights from our inaugural State of Space Analytics survey. We heard from 31 institutions, and one of the themes that really stood out that we want to talk about today is leaders are being far more deliberate about their real estate portfolios, whether it's exiting leases, choosing not to build, even demolishing buildings. Andrew, this seems like a meaningful shift in how higher ed thinks about space. I'm excited to unpack it with you. There's a couple key data points, I think, in here. One of them, 68% exited at least one lease since 2021. 52% decided not to build or lease space previously considered, and 48% demolished at least one building. Well, what's your reaction to these numbers?
Yeah, first off, thank you for having me on Bowtie Tuesday, Aaron. Excited to be here and to unpack all this with you. I think there's a lot interesting in here, specific to the question that you just asked, right? I think it's interesting to see so much movement generally, right, in the way folks are thinking about space. The demolition data really stood out to me, right? Getting out of a lease is by and large sort of a paper transaction, right? Demolishing a building is really complex and it has to be a very intentional action, right? There's capital planning involved in that. There's feasibility analysis. You're going to have to talk to stakeholders and donors. There really has to be a willingness from the institution to retire that asset permanently. That is not the same thing as getting out of a lease. And as you alluded to at the top, the survey respondents here, we had 31 great institutions participate in this. They're heavily R1, right? It's above 70%, right? So these are big, large, complex institutions with, a lot of alumni, a lot of students, a lot of donors. So when I hear a group like this, half of them have demolished a building in the last 5 years, that really to me signals that there may be some more increased willingness across the market to confront these long-term stewardship costs that we know about, right? You and I have talked about, there are some eye-watering numbers around deferred maintenance, across the industry and a lot of the campuses that we know and work with. And I think we're reaching a point, and this data may indicate that we're reaching a point that you can't invest your way out of this, right? There's going to have to be some tough decisions. And I think schools may be starting to reckon with this reality, right? We had one respondent that told us they either demolished or divested from 25 buildings over the last 7 years, right?
Amazing,
that feels like a lot. I can't say that should be the target for that. That won't be a reality for every campus that's out there. But, I think that's a signal of the opportunity here, right, to really substantially reduce the deferred maintenance backlog and to impact operating costs. I think the activity level overall across the whole survey set was, I think, interesting, but really the demolition stood out to me.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it seems like it's one of the areas when we talk about deferred maintenance or deferred capital renewal, and that just number going up every year, that it's one of the only ways to actually start to bring that down, right? Is you have to reduce your footprint so that doesn't continue to compound on it. It seems like some universities are really grabbing a hold of that idea and saying, hey, $1 billion worth of deferred capital renewal or that growing amount, that's just too much. What literally can we do, and how do we get some of this off our books? And so let's say for institutions that haven't done this kind of portfolio review, where would you suggest they begin?
Yeah, great question. I'm going to say there's really three things I would be starting with, right? I think the first is understanding the condition of my assets, right? Whether that's, FCI, FCNI, facility condition assessment of some sort, so that you have a good, consistent view of the health of your assets, right? And where the risk is across your portfolio. Then I think you have to get to some understanding of the real cost of operations, right? You probably have some of this data around, but have you really done it in a comprehensive way? And are you pulling that together regularly and understanding what that looks like? But you really need to get to a dollar per square foot type of figure on maintenance of space, custodial, operation, utilities operations, security operations. What am I spending to maintain the space that I have, whatever condition it's in? Mm-hmm. And then I think this is where some of the great work you do at CampusIQ comes in. You got to get to some real verifiable utilization data, right? We got to get beyond anecdote and get into observed usage patterns that tell you what's going on, what's really being used, and when. And I think when you can cross-tab those three things, right? Condition, cost, and utilization, you get a really grounded picture of what's being used, what's not, what's underutilized, don't forget there's opportunity for things to be really overutilized, right? There could be really
Totally.
busy buildings that like, I want to know what's going on there and what that's costing the institution, and just have an honest conversation, right? About what needs to be reallocated, what needs to be invested, if there's an opportunity for something like a demolition or a lease exit, right? But those three data points in my mind are where you need to start. So condition, cost, and then real utilization data, not people telling you that they come in the office.
So let's say you actually do have some of this data, right? Or you have enough to start making a case. If we were to look at, the leaders in higher ed, and they're seeing this deferred maintenance go up, and like, how can we bring it down? Like, how do you help get leaders more comfortable with this idea that less can actually be more when growth pressure still exists?
Oh,
Right. I
yeah.
want to be the president known for reducing what we do, right? I want to be the president known for growing what we do.
100%. And look, let's be honest, growth's not going away. It's not like we're never going to build another building, right? That's not even what we would recommend. I mean, that makes sense in a lot of cases. It's a really uncomfortable position to be in. So how do you get leaders comfortable with that? And so some strategies that we think are really effective. I'll kind of give you two paths here. One is the one that would be preferred, that I think we want to guide our clients down and that we want to see people do. And then I'll give you the, break glass, path. So I think on the preferred path, use pilots, right? Start small. Do something in a particular building or in a particular area of campus, right? This helps you kind of create a proof of concept. It's going to reduce the fear and the anxiety around this whole concept of moving space and changing people's space allocation. It gives people something tangible to react to, right? Instead of just debating different hypotheses of what we could do, right? Do something small, anything small, right? Adjust space allocation on a floor in a building, right? And see what happens, right?
Just make
and
a
then
baby step, right?
yeah,
Make
baby
progress,
step.
get a win.
Pilots, right? Use pilots. And then build a coalition, right? Don't try to do it alone, right? Involve particularly academic leaders, right? You're not going to get a lot done on a campus successfully without the academy behind you, right? Get faculty involved, even get students involved in some inappropriate areas, right? Don't make change to people, try to make it with them. Right. I think, if you can do it with some transparency, if you can kind of create shared ownership, it really goes a long way to reducing anxiety. And I think what's really fun is if you do both these things, if you use pilots and you build a coalition, it's like a flywheel. These two things will reinforce each other, right? If you have a coalition that's involved in the pilot, it makes, the pilot more credible, right? And then when the pilot's happening and people can see change, you've got that coalition out there talking up the change and being champions for what they're seeing as being an improvement, right? Or giving you the feedback that the pilot's not working. And that's also very credible, right? So that's the good path that I say we want to follow. Let's be real. That's not where every client is, right? That's not where every institution is. If you find yourself in that place where this is just a financial red alert, right? I think you can use that position, as unfortunate as it is, and not that we want to be there, but you can use that financial distress as sort of the burning platform to accelerate this alignment and to get people making some change, right? That's not the preferred area, but I want to just recognize that I think there are certainly a number of institutions that we know across the country that may find themselves more in that kind of position. I think you just have to take that stress and that challenge and use that as the burning platform, as it were.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I mean, at the end of the day, if there are decisions that you have to make, even though they're unpleasant, you have to make them. But in general, I think what this trend is really starting to show is, the emphasis here really isn't necessarily on retrenchment, right? And how do we make campus smaller or less meaningful? Instead, it's how all of a sudden do we focus on stewardship, right? And making a better campus where our buildings are full and they're lively, and we're not paying for buildings that aren't adding value to the student, staff, faculty experience. And we can't just continue to pay for things that aren't working. And so how do we figure out what's working with our stakeholders? What do they really want? And how do we get smarter with spending that capital, right? And that's that.
Yep.
Growth isn't gone, right? All of a sudden now
Right.
it's intentional, right? We got to be more intentional about where we're actually allocating these dollars and getting better data to help make these decisions and bringing in those people. So instead of me dictating a decision, how do we build that coalition, right? How do we create a better vision of what do we want our campus to be, but doing it maybe in a different way than we've had to. Well, awesome. Been a great quick bow tie Tuesday. We'll definitely be back next week for another key insight into the space analytics survey.
Thanks so much for the time, Aaron. Great to be with you.